Today we're going to look at all of my Sony camera settings. Now this is an A7C. I took the mic off so I could record audio on this A7S II. And first things first, we are going to walk through the different custom modes. Honestly really important, and they say a lot about what kind of content you like to film. So first off, we have movie mode. In movie mode, I have it set to 4K 24 frames per second because that is the most common resolution and frame rate that I shoot in. It just makes it really easy to access. I have all of the extra video controls. So usually I have it in aperture priority because I don't have an ND filter at the moment. I left it in Oregon. All right, the second programmable mode I have is SNQ, and what I have this set to is 1 frame per second video time lapses. Whenever I just want a quick sort of time lapse to show something, maybe in a vlog, I just set it to SNQ mode, put it down, and it does 1 frame per second. Shows really good movement with cars, with people, whatever it is. I just set it to 24p and the frame rate to 1 frame per second. As you see, if you change it to, let's say, 60p, then it goes to 60 times speed of real life. I like 24, gives it a nice fast-paced feel without being too fast. And it works great, it's super easy. All right, next we have custom mode number 1, and this is actually my slow-mo setting. So I have this in 1080, 120 frames a second. So whenever I want to jump right in, shoot in slow motion, that is what I go to. So I don't have to change any settings other than just turning it up. Also an autofocus, nothing really crazy there. It's also an aperture priority mode. When I do sports stuff, I like the slow-mo to be more crisp and not have as many blurry lines, especially for flips. That's just a personal preference. All right, next we have custom mode number 2, and this is actually for astrophotography. So whenever I'm outside at night shooting space, the Milky Way, whatever, and I just want a picture, then I set it to the number 2. So for this, there's a few more specific settings. So the exposure is up at 15 seconds. The self timer is on 10 seconds, so there's no camera shake. The white balance is set to incandescent so that it remains sort of constant for the nighttime. The video settings don't matter, but it's just on 24 frames per second, so if I do shoot a video, it will be able to let in more light via the 180 rule if I need. And obviously it's in manual focus mode because you do not want autofocus when you're doing astrophotography. And finally we have mode 3. So mode 3 for me is actually for night lapses. So whenever I want a time lapse with 30 seconds between each frame all night, the entire Milky Way or the stars moving around, I will just set it right here. It defaults to manual focus. I focus on the stars, set it up, has a timer set and everything, and I am good to go. Set to a 15-second exposure. For both this and the astrophotography modes that I have set, you want the exposure compensation to be +2, so 2.0. That way you can keep the right amount of detail in the sky. That's just what you're supposed to do for astrophotography, because obviously the sky is really dark. So if you set the exposure too low, you lose a lot of details if it's just set to 0. The other thing with this obviously is interval shooting mode is on, as you see, with the automatic starting timer of 5 seconds, right? So in mode 2, we had the self timer, but in mode 3, we don't need it because there's one built into the intervalometer. So interval shooting starts in 5 seconds, and then the interval's every 30 seconds, and it does it for 360 shots, which turns out to be 15 seconds of 24 FPS video. Obviously, this is still in manual focus. So a lot of the settings are the same as astrophotography. It just has the interval shooting mode settings enabled. And those are all the different modes. You may be wondering, hey, there's no photo mode in this. So when I want to do anything with photos, I just switch it to aperture priority or to manual mode. And that I can just change on the fly. Let's get into the custom buttons. So if I press down, that is actually my APS-C crop mode. And if I press left, that is my clear image zoom. So 1.5 times zoom in crop mode and another 2 times zoom in clear image. So that's pretty nifty. After that, we have the control wheels or dials. So this dial does aperture and this one does shutter. So nothing crazy there. That's the only two dials we have, and those are the most commonly adjusted for sure. After that, we have the AF on button, which actually pulls up our white balance, so we can change that. Next, we have the right button, which pulls up our ISO, because that is a thing that we also want to do. So you can just press right and then use the wheel for the ISO. And the reason I kept it as the right button is because it actually says ISO directly on the camera here. So for simplicity's sake, we kept it there. All right, next is a button I use pretty often, which is the trash can button. And what that one does is it enables and disables manual focus. So you can see right now it's in autofocus. If I press it, it switches to manual. So then I can do my manual focusing all I want. And last but certainly not least is the center button here. And what this does is actually brings up my monitor brightness. And this I change all the time. When I go outside, I always want to switch it to sunny weather so I can see the screen. And when I go inside, I don't want it to be extremely bright, so I switch it back to manual, usually to 0. But so much faster to have it in this menu. So the only difference when I'm in a non-movie mode and it's in a photo mode is that this left button, instead of doing the clear image zoom, it actually pulls up the drive mode. So it lets you set a self timer or do things like that a lot easier. So when it's set to this, what I will actually do when it's in photo mode is start using my custom menu. So if I go on over here to this star symbol, this is where your custom menu is. So obviously you see I have zoom here for when it's in photo mode, but I also have peaking. So I'll change that. So when it's on, which I will do for manual focusing. So if I switch it to manual focus, you see all of the peaking come up. I usually have on high and red, but whatever's in focus will be sort of highlighted by those peaking ones. So let's switch it back to autofocus, get rid of those. Peaking is on, peaking level is high, and peaking color is red. All right, next we have the zebra, and this just shows you how overexposed you are. So if I want to see that, because I'm worried if something's overexposed, say my EV is up super high, these zebra lines show what is blown out or overexposed, and I can just tone this back down so that I know I'm not screwed in post. Our next is manual focus assist, and what this does is zoom in a ton while you're manual focusing. I use that particularly when I'm doing astrophotography, so I zoom up close to a star so I can get it really crisp and in focus. The second menu is the memory button, so that allows me, if I want to change any of those custom modes, to do that really easily without having to dig through the menus. And then also, if I want to change between 4K and 1080, whenever I am doing movie mode, because maybe I want to save space. Audio recording level, in case I need to adjust that. Record settings for the FPS. Grid line, we love that if we're looking for like the rule of thirds grid, right? It literally is called that. And it will show us that grid in case you want to frame something. Oh, and then finally, probably the only other one I use is a Finder Monitor one. So if I ever want to use the EVF again, I can put it back to auto so that when my eye goes up against it, the screen goes black and it switches to the EVF. However, I hate when it does that 99% of the time. So if you haven't already and it annoys you whenever the screen turns off all the time, go to Finder Monitor and switch it to Monitor Manual, and that will save you so much hassle. The last thing I did was change the sleep time. So the screen would go off after like 30 seconds. So whenever I was setting up a sit down shot, it would just go out and I would have to reach around the camera and try to feel which button to make it turn back on, which usually was the playback button twice. So I set it to only sleep after 5 minutes. So it would really have to be sitting there for a while for it to do that, because that was annoying me like crazy as well. 30 minutes seemed like a bit much, so I switched it to 5. Honestly, I probably could do 30 and be happy with it, but still want to save some power, even though these batteries last a really long time on the A7C. And that's just in the Setup 2 menu. How to add something to your custom menu, all you do is go to the favorites here, you go over to Add Item, and you just find what you want to add to your menu. Say I wanted to add the Troubleshooting mode, so the time-lapse setting in case I wanted to maybe do a normal sky time lapse rather than astrophotography, I could add that in there. And it stays in this menu, so you don't have to go in and out, which is really nice. If you want to change up a custom button, all you do is you go to your menu, you go to the number 2 camera, so the movie stuff, and you just go all the way over to number 9, and you select custom key, and then the one you want to change, it'll give you a little display of where it is. You just click on it, and then you can choose a new one. So pretty easy to set custom keys. This top one is for when it's in picture mode. This one is for when it's in movie mode, and the bottom one, which barely has any options, is for when it's in playback mode. So you can set custom keys individual to each of those. If you wanted to set a custom memory mode, so like to 1, 2, or 3, you would go configure all your settings. So you would have it either on manual, shutter, aperture, whatever you want. Set everything the way you want it to, including in the menus, right? If you want the intervalometer on. Maybe I would want it to start in autofocus mode instead of manual. So I switch it to autofocus mode. And then I go to menu, and then I go to number 3 in this very first camera category, and then down to memory. If memory is grayed out for you, try switching the mode to like movie mode or something, and then switching it back. That worked for me. So I would just switch it to like aperture or like to movie mode or like whatever, and then go back. And then sometimes that fixes the memory button being grayed out. But you would just click on it, and then you would press enter to sort of set it to these new settings. All right, so that's all the settings on my Sony a7C. I really love this thing. I love how I can switch from 4K 24 to slow-mo to time lapses of people and landscapes, cars, things like that. And then also have astrophotography and night lapses, all in easily programmable settings. It works really well, as well as just having normal photo mode be my aperture priority or manual or whatever I want to do. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what the settings on your Sony cameras are. And if you have any suggestions, or if you like the ones I have, they really can be just catered to what you do, right? So I shoot YouTube videos, sit down videos, sometimes we'll do time lapses for vlogs, and I love shooting astro. So that's what my settings are geared towards, all my custom modes and everything. But yeah, honestly, it's a great camera, Sony a7C. I love it. Thanks for checking out the video. Peace.